The first time I saw the house on Maple Lane, I knew it was home. The little white picket fence, the wraparound porch, the way the sunlight dappled through the overgrown oak in the front yard, it screamed possibility. I'm Mia, 32, a graphic designer with a green thumb and a dream of turning my new yard into a botanical haven. I'd spent years in cramped city apartments, sketching gardens I'd never plant. Now, in this quiet suburban neighborhood, I finally had my chance. Maple Lane was picture perfect, the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved from porches. But there was a catch. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, ruled with an iron fist. I'd heard horror stories about HOAs, but I figured I'd keep my head down, plant my trees, and stay out of trouble. That was my first mistake. The trouble started with Karen, the HOA president, 50-something, with a peroxide blonde bob and a smile that never reached her eyes. Karen was the queen of Maple Lane. She patrolled the neighborhood like a hawk, her clipboard always ready to jot down infractions. Forgot to mow your lawn, Karen's at your door. Mailbox slightly tilted, Karen's got a fine for that. I met her the day I moved in, when she handed me a 20-page HOA rulebook and said, "Follow this, and we'll get along just fine." Her tone said otherwise. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted to plant a couple of cherry blossom trees in my front yard. They'd bloom pink in spring, shade the house in summer, and make the whole street look alive. I checked the rule book. Nothing explicitly banned trees. So, I bought 2 saplings, spent a weekend digging, and planted them with care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something real. Then came the email. Subject: unauthorized landscaping. Karen's message was curt. My trees violated the HOA's aesthetic standards. I had 48 hours to remove them or face a $500 fine. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Aesthetic standards. The trees were barely 3 feet tall, and the rulebook didn't even mention them. I replied politely, asking for clarification. Karen's response: rules are rules. Compliance is mandatory. I wasn't just mad, I was humiliated. I'd poured my heart into those trees, and Karen was treating me like a criminal. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules. It was about power. The next morning, I marched to Karen's house to plead my case. Her McMansion was pristine, with manicured hedges and a lawn so green it looked fake. She answered the door in a tracksuit, her clipboard already in hand. "Karen, I don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The rulebook doesn't ban trees. My cherry blossoms are small. They're not blocking anyone's view. They're unapproved," she snapped, cutting me off. "Maple Lane has a cohesive look. Your trees don't fit." End of discussion. I blinked. Cohesive look. Half the houses have rose bushes, and Mr. Thompson has a giant inflatable Santa in July. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Those are grandfathered in. You're new. You follow the rules, or you pay the consequences." I went home, fuming. The absurdity of it all hit me like a truck. Grandfathered inflatable Santas were fine, but my trees were a crime. I spent hours poring over the rule book, looking for loopholes. There were none. The HOA had vague clauses about community standards that gave Karen unchecked power. I considered fighting legally, but I didn't have the money for a lawyer. I was stuck. Then came the shock. 2 days later, I woke up to find my cherry blossom saplings gone. Not just removed, destroyed. Their delicate roots were ripped from the soil. Their branches snapped like twigs. A note was taped to my mailbox. Non-compliance resolved. Ho! I stood there, staring at the mangled remains, my hands shaking. Karen hadn't just enforced a rule, she'd declared war. I called a neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, a sweet retiree who'd lived on Maple Lane for decades. "Oh, honey," she sighed. "Karen's been like this forever. Last year, she fined me for planting tulips. Said they were too bright. Well, most of us just keep quiet to avoid her wrath. Why doesn't anyone fight back?" I asked. Mrs. Lopez shrugged. "She's got the HOA board in her pocket. They're all her cronies. You either play along or you move." I wasn't moving, but I also wasn't playing along. Karen had crossed a line, and I was done being polite. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a glass of wine in hand, and started plotting. I wasn't going to scream or sue or slash her tires, though. Trust me. The thought crossed my mind. No. My revenge would be smarter. It would be unforgettable. And it would hit Karen where it hurt most her pride. The idea came to me at 2 a.m. when I was scrolling through a local nursery's website. They had a program called Trees for Tomorrow, where you could sponsor trees to be planted in communities. The cost was low, $50 per tree, including delivery and planting. A light bulb went off. What if I sponsored trees for every house on Maple Lane, except Karen's and her HOA buddies? The neighborhood would bloom, Karen would seethe, and I'd stay squeaky clean. I spent the next week planning. Maple Lane had 42 houses. Karen's inner circle 4 HOA board members lived in 5 of them, including her own. That left 37 houses I could sponsor trees for. I called the nursery, explained my plan, and worked out the details. They were thrilled, especially when I offered to pay up front. I chose a mix of trees, maples, dogwoods, magnolias that would thrive in our climate and look stunning. The nursery agreed to deliver and plant them all in one day for maximum impact. But I needed the neighborhood on board. I didn't want anyone thinking I was pulling a stunt without their consent. So, I went door to door, starting with Mrs. Lopez. I told her about Karen's tree trashing and my plan to sponsor trees for everyone but the HOA. Her eyes lit up. "Count me in," she said, "and I'll spread the word." Over the next few days, I talked to every neighbor except the HOA crew. Most were fed up with Karen's tyranny and loved the idea. Mr. Thompson, the inflatable Santa guy, laughed so hard he nearly choked. "You're a genius. Mia, Karen's gonna lose it." By the end, 37 households were in, and the nursery had their addresses. The planning day was set for a Saturday, when Karen would be hosting her monthly HOA meeting at her house. Perfect timing. I wanted her to see the trees going up while she was stuck in her stuffy living room, preaching about standards. I also tipped off the local paper, framing it as a community beautification project. They ate it up and promised to send a photographer. When the day arrived, I could barely contain my excitement. At 8 a.m., 3 nursery trucks rolled into Maple Lane, loaded with trees. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, kids running around, everyone buzzing with anticipation. The nursery crew worked fast, planting tree after tree while the photographer snapped pictures. Mrs. Lopez got a magnolia. Mr. Thompson a red maple. My own yard got a new cherry blossom, right where the old ones had been. By noon, Maple Lane was transformed. Every house except the 5 HOA ones had a beautiful new tree, each with a small plaque reading, "Sponsored by Mia Reynolds for a greener tomorrow." The street looked like a postcard, and the neighbors were over the moon. People hugged me, thanked me, even teared up. It wasn't just about the trees. It was about standing up to Karen's nonsense. Meanwhile, Karen's HOA meeting was falling apart. I'd timed the planting, so her house was one of the last to be skipped. When the trucks drove past her pristine lawn, she stormed outside, her face redder than a fire truck. "What is this?" she shrieked, waving her clipboard. "You can't plant trees without HOA approval." The nursery manager, a no-nonsense guy named Tom, handed her a permit. "All approved by the city. Ma'am, these are private donations for private properties. No HOA jurisdiction." Karen's jaw dropped. She turned to me, standing on my porch with a coffee mug and a smirk. "You did this, didn't you?" She spat. I shrugged. "Just spreading a little kindness." "Karen, you should try it sometime." The neighbors erupted in cheers. Karen stomped back inside, her HOA cronies trailing behind like deflated balloons. The photographer caught it all, and the next day, the local paper ran a front-page story. "Maple Lane blooms with community spirit, thanks to one woman's generosity." My name was everywhere, and Karen's wasn't mentioned once. The fallout was glorious. Karen's reign of terror started to crumble. Neighbors who'd once cowered began pushing back. At the next HOA meeting, Mrs. Lopez proposed a vote to amend the rule book, limiting the board's power. It passed overwhelmingly, with Karen's own neighbors turning against her. 2 HOA board members resigned, tired of the drama. Karen clung to her presidency, but her influence was shot. My trees became the talk of the town. The nursery got so much business from the publicity that they offered me a discount on more plants. I turned my yard into the garden I'd always dreamed of, complete with a bench under my cherry blossom tree where neighbors often stopped to chat. Maple Lane wasn't just prettier, it was happier. People waved more, smiled more, connected more, all because of a few trees and one well-aimed jab at a bully. Karen never apologized, but she didn't have to. Every time she drove past my house, or Mrs. Lopez's, or Mr. Thompson's, she saw those trees living proof that kindness and creativity could outshine her petty tyranny. I heard she tried to plant a tree in her own yard a month later, but it died from neglect. Poetic justice, if you ask me. As for me, I learned something. Revenge doesn't have to be loud or vicious. Sometimes, it's as simple as doing good for everyone but the person who wronged you. It's about honor, gratitude, and lifting up the people who matter. Maple Lane taught me that, and I'll carry it with me forever. So, here's my advice if someone tries to crush your dreams. Don't get mad. Get even. Plant a tree. Or 37. The end.